Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for coming. And thank you for coming. Um, I hope Sweden has been treating you well. Yeah?
3 days, and it's been good so far. Everyone's been quite friendly, and Stockholm's really beautiful. I sent posters here in '99 for a show, but I was too poor to fly here then.
Yeah.
And I got a bunch of photos back from the people that did that show of them putting my posters up, and all the settings were quite nice. It was like a really great backdrop for my work. So.
Yeah.
But it's even better in person.
Yeah. Nice to have you here. You've been in the game for a long time. And I know that some of your early inspirations is from the punk rock era and like skate culture and artists like Andy Warhol and Roy Lichtenstein and stuff. Like in the beginning of your art career.
Yep.
But today I feel like there's been a switch from Andre the Giant and what we see today. So I'm just wondering if your inspirations and what drives you to make art today has it changed, or is it still the same influences, or?
Well, I think that one's influences are always evolving because our lives are an accumulation of experiences, but sometimes the initial seeds that are planted are still blossoming years on. So the spirit of independence and do-it-yourself, working outside the system that came from punk rock, and then the sense of accessibility that came from pop artists like Warhol, Lichtenstein, Rauschenberg, that was important. But also there were political artists or social artists like Barbara Kruger and Jenny Holzer that were also a big influence on me, and the importance of using language. But I think the way that my work has evolved is that when I was younger, I was poor, I was struggling, I felt like it was me against the world. As I started to get a foothold, I started to understand the hierarchies of power a little bit more thoroughly. And so my sensitivity about classism, racism, sexism, xenophobia, all of those things started to get, I got more sophisticated, and I was more sensitized to that if I'm struggling, but as a straight white male, the struggle for other people who aren't straight white males is even harder.
Yeah.
So I started to understand that, and I started to weave some of those ideas about power and inequality and social justice into my work in a more intentional way.
Mm-hmm. Cool. And also, like me, I'm a young artist. I started 2 years ago, and people may not have seen my art really, but it's very satiric, but it brings up a lot of political issues and like topical issues, primarily about different communities, the Black community, colorism, racism, etc. And it's going up, but I'm just wondering, like, there's a lot of challenges, and it can take some time to get where you want to be. And I was just wondering, when do you feel was your major switch? Like, I know that you did the Obama Hole poster that like went viral.
Yeah.
But do you yourself feel like you maybe had a major switch like before that, like for yourself? Or was it that one?
So I've been making street art since 1989, 35 years. I started when I was a freshman in college. I was very poor throughout my 20s, but around age 30, I started to, largely because of the internet, I started to find an audience, and I was doing some graphic design jobs, doing some printing of posters, doing some small art shows, selling some T-shirts, and this was, it's not, I wish I could give you an amazing pivotal moment, but I'd say that the moment that I went from total fear and desperation about survival to having just enough income from all of these different places to be able to do something like buy a plane ticket, rent a car. I was still crashing on couches, but these buy a fold-up ladder so that I could get to good spots to put up a big poster, reach billboard ladders. This was a life of luxury as far as I was concerned. And when you stop living as hand to mouth, the possibility of living as a creative person on your own terms, the hope that gave me, it was immeasurable. So for me, everything since then has just been still a lot of hard work, but it's been icing on the cake. I didn't expect to ever have my art mischief hobby, all the stuff I did make me a reasonable living. I thought that I would have to do things that were for other people. Even out of college, when I was in college, I started a screen printing business, and I thought, well, if I have that business, I have the equipment there to print my own stuff, but I'm going to survive printing other people's stuff. I did that, and my stuff failed, and the business for other people failed. So then I had to regroup and go work for a guy in the skateboard industry, something I liked to a degree, but it was hard work, and the skateboard industry is very fickle and pays very little. And then I moved to working for record labels and movie companies and other clothing lines. And all of those things always had a lot of pressures for me to not, to make someone else happy, not do exactly what I wanted. So the moment I started to see the possibility of me getting to focus more on my own work, that was a really big turning point. Mm-hmm. But it took about 10 years of what my parents described as total failure. Yeah. To get to that level of success.
Yeah, very up and down. Yeah. And also, I feel like your style is very specific. You have your own color palette, I would say. Very recognizable. And also very political and in touch with social issues, etc. And you explained it in the beginning a bit, but I was just wondering, because Andre the Giant was one thing. Yeah. And yeah, you said you was broke and all of that stuff. But did the political stuff grow with time? Was that something that came of interest with time and you put yourself into? Or was it something that you've always been a part of?
It took me a little bit of time to develop my confidence. As a teenager, when I got into punk rock, I also got into reggae, and then very quickly after that, I got into hip-hop like Public Enemy and Boogie Down Productions that were very political. So music was a template for art and politics and social commentary all being combined. When I made the original Andre the Giant sticker, it was just a bit of mischief, but it was a pushback against the control of public space being isolated to the government and big corporations. So even though the Andre the Giant sticker wasn't political at face value, the disruption of the control of public space was somewhat political. But then I decided I wanted to evolve it to something a little bit more serious and conceptual. And I think when it really clicked for me was when George Bush was elected, and then shortly after that, the Iraq War was started. That's when I became more direct. There's a piece over there that's a Stop Racism piece. It's from 1989. I was dealing with that. I also was dealing with freedom of speech in some of my work. I was dealing with surveillance, police brutality, the police harassment of skateboarders. But I didn't feel I was personally knowledgeable enough about a lot of social and political issues to be more topical and more specific until I hit about 30. And then what I realized was two things. If I did some reading that I would be more knowledgeable than most people, because most people don't read, so the bar is set very low. And then secondly, that a lot of the politicians themselves, whether they were ignorant or just focusing on things that helped them manipulate the population, they were not speaking to the full spectrum of the issues out there. So why shouldn't I be talking about the stuff I wanted to talk about? You know, I think confidence is something that we all find challenging, maybe. I mean, I know I do. But what I realized is that my lack of confidence and fear of being not smart enough was maybe keeping me from participating meaningfully, and it only required a little bit of courage and effort to participate in a way that mattered.
Mm-hmm. And you've done like We the People, Obama Hope poster, Raise the Levels, a lot of different stuff. But I was wondering more specifically about something you did recently, about the collab with Greenpeace and Unmute Gaza of Bilal Khalid's image of the crying child. And I want to take it up today just because I feel like it's so relevant. And also with this confidence, bringing it up to the public and stuff. It's a lot of great stuff, like coming at you, like the commentary and stuff from the public, but also there's a lot of criticism and
so
a lot of challenges. So I was just wondering, how do you handle that? And
I think that almost all my art is driven by a sense of empathy and concern for people who are suffering, and any way I can push back against unnecessary suffering I think is important, even if I know I'm going to be attacked for it. So when I did the Unmute Gaza piece, it was about 3 months after the war, two or 3 months after the war started. It was about a little over 2 months after the war started in Gaza. And of course, I was horrified by Hamas's attack because a lot of innocent people were killed. But then the counter by the Israelis was so extreme and so many innocent people were dying, I felt like I had to speak out, and I felt like it wasn't getting the same level of attention in the media. Now, it's a complex issue in terms of the history of the region, but it's not complicated when it comes to respect for human life and respect for the equal dignity of a culture that's not your own. That this is the problem, that people say this person is expendable because they don't share my religion, they don't share my culture, they're not from the same country. This is a problem globally, but especially in that, in that conflict. And I felt like it was really important for me to speak out on behalf of the people suffering in Gaza and to advocate for a ceasefire. Now, I was attacked from both sides. I was attacked because I didn't make that image sooner, and I was attacked for being anti-Semitic because I made the image at all. And I find it really reductive and counter to a sophisticated conversation when people say, "Oh yeah, choose a side." It's I'm on the side of humanity. Mm. And when it comes to the idea that if I support a ceasefire, that makes me anti-Semitic. I supported us being the United States not invading Iraq, and that didn't make me anti-America. I felt like that made me more of a patriot. There are Israelis who are against what's happening in Gaza also. So, the way that a lot of it gets reduced down to, well, if you think this way, then it makes you evil in this one narrow definition. I find that evidence of the very same problem that allows the indiscriminate killing of people to happen. So, I look at social media and I go, yeah, and you're the one that's on board for the next terrible thing. But I try to use my voice in a way that speaks to these things, hopefully in a way that can connect emotionally to the better part of what we are as sensitive human beings. But you can't get through to everyone. I just try, and sure, it's painful to be attacked, but because I have a sense of responsibility, I would be in more pain knowing that I didn't have the courage to speak out on behalf of what I think is right.
And that's commendable, yeah. But it's one thing on social media, I feel like, and with the public. But when it comes to more formal settings, like you've worked with museums, you're at Fotografiska right now, yeah. Do you feel like you've had to adapt your opinions or your, like the visuals of your work, etc., to like fit in certain rooms?
No, not usually. Everything that I've touched on politically is fairly well represented in this show. I did in Korea. I did a really large show, and there are a lot of pieces that I've used that use rays as a graphic motif. But Korea has this knee-jerk reaction to rays as connected to the Japanese battle flag because of all the suffering that they endured from the Japanese during World War II. And so they said, some of these images with the rays, only a couple, because I've used a lot of rays, but a couple of them use red and white rays. And it wasn't inspired by the Japanese battle flag at all. This is a motif that's used in many, many different cultures. But the singular interpretation by Koreans, they said, is going to be a problem for the show. People are going to protest the show. Apparently, the band Maroon 5, the least offensive band in the history of bands, had their tour canceled because they used rays in their artwork for Korea. So I just accepted that out of 450 pieces, to remove 2 and go down to the small number of 398 was worth it. But because it wasn't, all the messages that were in those pieces were represented in other pieces anyway. So it didn't compromise the content of the show, but it potentially removed a landmine from the whole equation that could be disruptive to everything else about the show. Sometimes these battles are important to fight selectively and intelligently, being thinking diplomatically. I'm not a politician for good reason. Compromise isn't always easy for me, but I do understand that if you're looking at the benefit of the fabric of society contains a vast spectrum of opinions and types of people, and I think individualism is one thing that's screwing a lot of things up. Not that we shouldn't all have the opportunity to be who we are as individuals, but the idea that that is the only thing that matters. Because actually, we're social creatures. Our connections with each other and how we how we work as sort of a Gaia, not only as a family, as a school, locally, as a nation, but globally, is really important to consider. And things would be a lot better if people weren't so selfish and thought more that way.
Yeah, I agree with that one. Yeah. But moving on to like, I'm very interested with, because I do graffiti sometimes, but also a lot of social commentary. And yeah, you've seen it.
Well, I saw some of your stuff online, but yeah.
Did you like it?
I did, yeah.
Yeah. But I was just wondering, like, from the start to now, how do you balance your street art roots with making success in the mainstream art world? Do you feel like it's been intertwining, like the both sides with each other, or there's been kind of been a challenge, you had to add something or take away something, or?
So a lot of people have these ideas about why I do what I do and who I am, and sometimes they're extremely wrong. And so I'm glad to explain myself. But what I believe in is the value of accessible art. So street art was one component of my philosophy to connect art with people where they live their lives, rather than making them go to a space that can feel intimidating, like a gallery or a museum. Another way for me was to put my art and graphics on T-shirts, murals, doing things with activist organizations. But galleries and museums are also a great venue for a really strong, controlled presentation where an audience comes and actually gets to spend time, and I get to not just have a piece put up before the cops came in a place that might get torn down quickly, but actually have, something that I've spent not only 10 minutes on, but months maybe. And so all of these things are part of my belief that art should be utilizing as many platforms as possible to connect with people in every zone of culture. What I have had frustration with is that the more opportunities I've had, the more spread thin I am. When street art was one of my only outlets, of course I was crushing it out there, and I loved having kind of the notoriety of being hardcore and being one of the most up people.
Can I ask something? How many times have you been arrested?
18.
Is that a lot of money?
Fines can be a lot of money, but lawyers are a lot of money. Yeah, it can be a lot of money. Yeah, and it can be really inconvenient. And the cops have beaten me up too, so it can be dangerous. And I'm a diabetic, and they've taken my insulin away and not given me my insulin for 3 days, which made me sick to being on the verge of death. In the U.S., maybe the cops here are nice. Like, how are you doing? Do you need any medical attention? Yeah. The cops aren't like that in the U.S.
They're a bit nicer.
They're like, you're a scumbag. If you die, whatever. And it's really, I've never felt less human than at the mercy of the cops, because they're merciless. And when people have talked in the U.S. about how there's just a few bad apples. Of course, they all get caught on, not all, a lot of them get caught on video, and they go, that's just the exception. No, this is actually a very tainted culture, because everyone knows the phrase, power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. And this is why there needs to be good oversight for the police, because unchecked power always creates sadism. Mm-hmm. But yeah, the thing about being arrested is I always feel like, okay, this sucks, but this is kind of a symptom of everything I'm pushing back against in my work. So if I stop doing street art because of these very difficult interactions with the police and the expense and all of that, then I'm sort of just giving in to the very same problems that I'm trying to address in my work.
Yeah.
My wife's not happy about it, though.
I bet she's not. I just have one more question for you. Me, as a 22-year-old artist, on the rise, selling works here and there, and painting here and there, spraying here and there. I was just wondering, when you're reflecting over your own journey, what advice would you give to me?
Well, I think there are several things. One, not being afraid is really important. I held myself back by being afraid a lot when I was younger. And even though there were certain things I was doing that maybe to someone that didn't know me, they would see as really risky and badass and courageous, there were still just talking to people and saying, would you help me? Would you give me an opportunity? I had too much pride and too much fear for that. So, a lot of artists who have made it further are excited to help younger artists, and I didn't realize that until I finally started asking. But so there's that. There's always going to be a lot of people who will attack you just for having the courage to express yourself, and that's a reflection of their own fear. They're saying, I'm fearful and apathetic. How dare you have the courage to say that you have an idea you want to share? So pity them. Don't let them influence how you're thinking. Tenacity is very important. Things don't reach a critical mass instantly. Now, there's always some person who is an overnight sensation on the internet that everyone goes like, oh, well, if that person did this one TikTok video, then like I'm gonna replicate that and I'm gonna be, have 50 million views. It doesn't usually work that way, and so don't expect it. Don't be so disappointed when it doesn't. I've had a few viral hits over my career, and I'm so grateful and so so moved when it happens, but I try equally hard on every single thing I create. I've made a couple of thousand images in my career, and about 4 of them have been viral phenomenons. And when people go like, yeah, but what about that Obama poster? Just do the next thing like that. I'm like, that is lightning in a bottle.
Yeah.
You don't even understand, and so don't let stuff like that affect you. Be hard on yourself in that you have an idea of what your vision is that only you purely understand, and if you're trying to achieve it and you haven't achieved it, don't bullshit yourself. Keep pushing. But when you do hit it and it doesn't connect with other people, don't say, I'm doing it wrong. Keep trying, because likely the thing that moves you the most, that you think is your most potent voice, will eventually find an audience. So I see it happen all the time. People second guess their instincts around that and they give up. But, this might sound contradictory, but also talk to your friends and your peers that you trust and get their opinion, and don't be afraid to get some feedback that is coming from a point of view that was a blind spot for you. I do that all the time with a lot of my coworkers. My wife, she's happy to be totally cruel.
Yeah.
So, but I respect people's opinions, and if I get an opinion and it's about how I'm not achieving the idea, then I know that there has to be another way to get there. And this is the therapeutic beauty of art for me, is that creating is an escape where I'm just in my own world. But once I get it right, it's a tool of engagement. And that dichotomy is so incredible. But in order to have that work the way it should work, you have to have both your internal dialogue and a dialogue with your friends and the public. So, just be rigorous about it. Cool. Is that enough of an answer?
That's enough. Yeah, okay. I will take that. Yeah, that was basically all my questions as a TCK. And I think we're going to open the floor for, the public to ask questions to any of us.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Nikki, and thank you, Shepard. A round of applause, please. Thank you.
Hi, Shepard. I last got to hear you talk in Los Angeles in like 2009 at the Getty Center. It's so awesome to see you here in Stockholm, so I'm so excited that you're here. You had a notable viral hit that also had a photography-related copyright issue that came up, and you got vilified a bit for that. What we're now seeing is these AI companies look at other pieces of art, they get inspired by what has previously been created, and they generate new work. I see that kind of similar to what you did. You were inspired by a photo. Yeah. You created a new, distinct work of value. These AI companies, they're looking at a lot of works. They generate something that is new and built off of that inspiration. You also have a distinctive style now that those AI companies can look at and replicate. I'm curious how you feel about that. What the interplay is between inspiration and new created works, and also how do you think copyright needs to evolve to address culture building on top of itself?
Well, I've for whatever reason, humility or insecurity, always felt that originality is somewhat of a delusional concept. Everyone is inspired. Everything that we output is based on a vast accumulation of inputs that we decide what we like and what we don't like, and then we make our thing, and it's influenced by all those things. Now, I do think there is some originality in the way that that new creation can provide a twist to all those inspirations that makes it memorable and recognizable. I mean, a perfect example is Andy Warhol. And some people, who I think are idiots, say, Andy Warhol, he just took a photo, half-toned it, and threw it over some paint. Andy Warhol took mundane images that everyone knew and made subtle, sophisticated changes that elevated them and made them beautiful. And you may or may not like Warhol, but I don't think there's any way that the sophisticated choices he made can be discounted. He made things that by adjusting the contrast of the image, by choosing the color theory and the selective mark making for the images, made a big difference. I find the idea that somebody wakes up in the middle of the night, tabula rasa, has a eureka epiphany, and puts on a beret and does something, and God spoke to them. Shut up. Now AI is not an artist making choices. AI is an algorithm that is able to aggregate a tremendous amount of information and make a calculation. I've been happy to see that all the AI attempts at my work don't look quite as good as my work. That's, I'm somewhat biased towards my own work, but every art is subjective, and that's great. But my concern with AI, much more than how it deals with copyright, because we're almost all voluntarily giving a lot of our data, our experiences to social media companies, to search engines, to everything. And that's a very long conversation about the ethics of that. But AI is doing basically the same thing. And but where I become very, and there are artists and photographers and newspapers that have said we don't want our content being part of AI, and I think that they should have that right to withhold it. I'm not interested in trying to withhold my stuff. But where I think the challenges are with AI are how it is going to, in ways that are almost imperceptible, influence our behaviors, because the way that we already are dealing with echo chambers, if you take the speed and sophistication of AI and look at how that can be used to figure out what our trigger points are politically, what our desires are for what we're going to consume, I think that AI can potentially manipulate us in ways that we aren't going to be as aware of. And my entire art campaign has been about encouraging people to think about things they wouldn't think about. Originally, it was about getting people to question everything they're confronted with. That was the obey concept. And I think that you have to have your eyes open, and you have to understand the mechanics of the manipulation to even know you're being manipulated. And I think that's going to become harder to do with AI. So I'm quite worried about that.
Right, thank you. You over there? Okay, sorry.
Hi, thank you so much for the chat. I was wondering, you are inspired by punk and skateboarding culture. Where do you kind of see this counterculture happening today, and how does that affect art and activism today?
Well, there are a lot of subcultures that I think are still existing. There are iterations of punk. There's underground hip hop. A lot of the tools to produce music are easier to access now. So when you see people making their own beats in their bedroom, a lot of times the stuff is really as good as something that's made by a pop star. And so the way that the counterculture and the dominant culture, the barriers between the two have become so much thinner is really fascinating to me. But one of the things I liked about counterculture was that if you just decided, I have no shot in the mainstream, I'm just going to go and mutate over here in this corner with 10 friends, it could get really interesting. Now everybody could be famous with their next post, their next TikTok video. I think that brings out the worst in us. When I do a new post and it gets less likes than I hoped for, I just go oh God, I'm becoming one of those people. It's not good. And so when I see some of the digital art making, some street art is still, even though now it's got kind of a mainstream foothold, there's still always people coming up who they're learning in public. It's very exciting to see it. This primitive urge that you see that's unapologetic and crude. I always think that's inspiring, that's exciting, that's people finding an outlet, finding a voice. It's what I loved about punk. It wasn't about virtuosity. But I do feel a concern for counterculture not having the same space to exist without attention before all of a sudden the same pressures that make, Mariah Carey have to go into the hospital for a while because of all the mainstream pressure. I mean, that happened a long time ago, but even Dave Chappelle had to go on sabbatical because of all that pressure. I think a lot of younger people, they're doing their thing and all of a sudden they find a following and they're only in the early part of being really comfortable with their identity, and all of a sudden they're loved 1 second and then attacked the next, and it's that time to incubate is so crucial. And I say, choose to make the time. I have to choose to make the time for myself to be creative all the time, where I have to work at night in solitude. Just don't look at the internet. Don't interact with people. Have some space to have a clear head. It's really hard to have a clear head these days.
Thank you. I hope everybody's listening. This is diamonds. This is some words to take home. All right, I have one here.
Hello. I've been very lucky to see a number of your murals in the flesh, and one of my favourite or most interesting was the one that you did in Portugal with Vils. It was because obviously very different styles. Is there anyone living or dead that you would love to do a collaboration with?
Vils is really fun to work with because he's just a dynamo. He's got a lot of energy. He's extremely hardworking and ambitious and very intelligent. Does anyone here know Vils' work? All right. Look at that. Vils, everyone wants to etch their work into the history books. He just etches his work into the walls. It's creation and destruction simultaneously. So there's a really beautiful poetic life cycle to it. It moved me a lot when I first saw it. And he and I, we're really good friends. We've done several things together. But I'm glad you like that piece. As far as people living or dead, that's maybe unfairly vast. But Keith Haring is a really big hero of mine. He has a very different style than I do, but he made images about social issues. He made T-shirts. He did work on the street. He did murals. He worked with kids from challenging backgrounds. All of his philosophies, his statement that art is for everybody. I would have loved to collaborate with him.
Okay, I think we got time for 2 more questions. Anybody?
Hey, in preparation of your talk, I rewatched Exit Through the Gift Shop last night. I hadn't seen it since it was new, I think. It still holds up, it's really fun. But I was wondering if you could talk about, because I'm sure you have, and I'm sorry, you've talked about it a million times, but I've never heard you talk about it. Like, what was that experience? How much of that was fictional? I mean, I think a lot of it was clearly real, but some of it seemed like it wasn't real with Mr. Brainwash, whatever. So I was wondering if you could talk about that in any way you wanted to.
Have you seen this film?
No, I think I'm too young. Yeah.
Yeah, it came out. If you're 22 now, yeah, it came out when you were 10. So, or 8. Yeah, well, you should check it out. It's a
What was it called again?
Exit Through the Gift Shop. It's Banksy's movie.
Okay, cool. Will do.
All right, so have a decent number of you seen Exit Through the Gift Shop? Okay. First of all, there's nothing that's not real in it. There are some omissions. But Terry Guetta, AKA Mr. Brainwash, is very real. I just saw him at an opening in LA last weekend. And I had a smile on my face, and at the same time, my skin was crawling. He is one of those people that I feel very conflicted about because he's a force of nature. He can be very sweet, but he also is he's a hard worker, but he's also the least self-aware person I've ever known. Everything about the way he's portrayed is 100% accurate. I warned Banksy when I was introducing the two of them, because Banksy wanted to do some walls in LA, and Terry is a property owner. That's not mentioned in the film because it would hurt Banksy's street cred that he did legal walls. But I introduced the two of them, and when I did, I said, Terry's been filming me for 5 years, and I don't think he's capable of making a film with a linear narrative, so beware. Yet Terry ingratiated himself, and then Banksy did let him film him, and then he realized the same thing I told him at the beginning. And so Banksy's smarter than I am, so I was like, how am I going to get this footage from Terry? I never thought I'm going to make a film about him failing to make a film. But Banksy thought, yeah, I'll get the film from him and make the film about him failing to make a film, because instead he wants to become an artist, and how this also shows the dynamics of an underground culture finally achieving a level of hype that someone like Terry can get some shine, and this is an indictment of all of us. It's a very smart film conceptually. It's got a great sense of humor. When you have thousands of hours of footage, you can basically cherry pick the stuff that allows you to tell the story you want to tell, and that's exactly what Banksy did. You look at it, and it's all true, but it's Banksy's philosophy and sense of humor driving the shape of the story. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. We have one last one here.
A question for both of you. I'm over here in the back to the right. All the way in the back. So maybe I'm sort of the way I'm going to ask the question might be imposing my view on both of you, but I'm constructed that way anyway. So we run a design studio, and when we bring in new people to the studio, they always sort of question me because I'm only working with the typeface Helvetica, but so my team is so weird. But I'm sort of making it feel a different, like it's a different type, even though it's the same type, and that's became something I just do, kind of my identity in a way. And Shepard, kind of when I looking at your art, to me, this is the imposing part. It's kind of like it's one style, and it's evident to me that it's one style, but it feels different and means different with every artwork you do. So my question to both of y'all is there a method to that, Shepard? And Nikki, what drives, what's the core drive in the way you create your art?
Do you want to start?
I've been talking a lot.
I know. You go first.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was my way of saying you should go first. But I've been talking a lot, so I've got some inertia. Let me just keep going. That wasn't what I was doing. But but whatever you prefer.
Yeah. You go.
All right, cool. So style. It's interesting that you say that, you know, my work has a recognizable style. I think that's a compliment because my work has been inspired by a lot of different styles and infused a lot of different styles, but I still think it's recognizable. And even, you know, there's a few different zones that it exists in that one might, you know, a piece might have more of an Art Nouveau influence, another might have more of a Russian constructivist influence, another might have a punk rock influence. But because the way that I illustrate is always to refine, stylize, and idealize things and remove everything unnecessary and just focus on the most potent essence of a piece, I think that's what ties it all together. It's interesting that you were talking about using Helvetica consistently, but how you place it on a background with other imagery, the spacing, there's so many things that can happen. It's sort of like saying, like, is every tofu dish the same? It's not. You know, Helvetica maybe has a little more flavor than tofu, but it's still a pretty neutral typeface. But you know, somebody that's a really great chef could find 1,000 ways to make tofu work. And is that a fair analogy? But anyway, but I think that what a lot of people do is they don't look in a deeper way at the sort of chorus of how things come together, where maybe one thing is a little bit pushed more to the front, but there are a lot of things underpinning that, playing along with it, and yet they, you know, in a very reductive way say, like, well, it's this, the trombone's out front, and I'm just like, man, come on, spend a little bit more time, a little bit more effort thinking on this. But then again, that's the beauty of art, is that sometimes it's just creates a feeling and you respond, you blurt something out without understanding the complexity of what's delivering it. So I spend a lot of time tinkering with my stuff. I know the complexity in the pursuit of simplicity. And so yeah, I mean, there's no exact science to it. It just is a lot of trial and error for me.
Är det samma fråga till mig?
I'm gonna ask it again, Nikki. So my question to you was, what kind of sort of drives your art or your expression, or, yeah.
I'm sorry, I totally missed that side of the question, but I'm gonna let her answer that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yay. So just, it's kind of hard without visually showing you guys, but I work with a lot of satire in my own cartoons, displaying real life actions and situation, but just in my way, like real life, but not real life. So funny looking cartoons with very like exaggerated features. And to me, it's very important just because a lot of the times, not only in the art world, but like with certain issues or topics, it's not very represented for someone like me or my friends or wherever grown up. We don't really get that type of platform to express feelings, thoughts, or damn. Yeah, like some other people do. So yeah, my aim is really to like enlighten people about certain issues that may not involve them like directly, but they may be a part of a structure that they may not be aware of. So just to enlighten people about like what they can learn more about and not be a part of that structure. Let's say like colorism or racism or just like Palestine, Israel, like there's a lot of stuff that people do that may not, they don't think they're doing anything wrong, but they're a part of something that may be wrong. I don't know if that makes sense. But yeah, just to enlighten people about certain issues that may not get the light it should, by media, by people, or just by the norms that we live in, like especially here in like Sweden or just Western countries. So that would be my answer.